In this video, I'll show you 10 states nobody is moving to in 2025 and 2026. One American state is losing residents so fast that entire school districts are consolidating because there aren't enough children left to fill the classrooms. America's population is shifting dramatically, but not in the direction most people think. While headlines focus on booming cities in Texas and Florida, 10 states are experiencing population collapse that's accelerating every year. If you clicked on this video wondering which states Americans are fleeing and what's driving them away, you're about to discover trends that real estate agents won't tell you and politicians won't admit. From economic stagnation to infrastructure breakdown to costs that make living impossible, these 10 states aren't just losing people, they're facing existential crises. And the data suggests things are getting worse, not better.
Number 10. Hawaii. Paradise has a price tag, and for most residents, it's become completely unaffordable. Hawaii is experiencing one of America's highest outbound migration rates, with over 12,000 residents leaving annually, and the economics tell a devastating story. Median home prices have hit $1.1 million, putting homeownership out of reach for anyone without generational wealth or mainland money. Rent for a basic one-bedroom apartment averages $2,400 monthly, and that's not luxury living. That's standard housing in a market where supply can't keep up with demand from wealthy outsiders. The grocery bill runs 67% higher than mainland averages, with basic items like milk costing nearly $8 per gallon due to shipping expenses. Teachers, nurses, and service workers, the backbone of any functioning society, are leaving because even with multiple jobs, they can't afford to stay. The cruel irony is that tourism thrives while the native Hawaiian population gets displaced from ancestral lands their families have occupied for generations. Las Vegas has become home to so many displaced Hawaiians that locals call it the ninth island. The cultural loss is immeasurable, as communities that maintain traditions for centuries are scattered across the mainland. What remains is an economy built for visitors and vacation homeowners, not for the people who actually make Hawaii function. The islands are beautiful, but beauty doesn't pay rent or feed families, and working-class residents have reached their breaking point. Hawaii's bleeding residents to impossible costs, but our next state is losing people to something more fundamental: decades of economic decline with no recovery in sight.
Number 9. West Virginia. This state hasn't just lost population recently, it's been shrinking every single decade since 1950, and the trend is accelerating. West Virginia lost over 18,000 residents last year alone, continuing a 70-year pattern of decline. The median household income sits around $55,000, among America's lowest, while labor force participation barely reaches 54%, meaning nearly half of working-age adults aren't employed. The coal industry that built these communities has collapsed, without replacement industries emerging. Healthcare infrastructure ranks 49th nationally, with rural areas essentially abandoned by medical providers. The opioid epidemic has devastated communities, with overdose rates consistently among America's highest. Young people who pursue education leave immediately. 1/3 of college graduates are gone within 5 years of finishing school. The median age keeps climbing as youth flee and older residents have nowhere else to go. Infrastructure is crumbling, with roads deteriorating, bridges failing safety inspections, and internet access so limited that remote work isn't viable in many areas. The mountains that once symbolized strength now feel like barriers, trapping people in economic decline. Politicians make promises during campaigns and disappear afterward, while conditions continue deteriorating. Housing is cheap, 17% below national averages, but affordability means nothing without employment opportunities. You can buy a house for under $150,000, but banks won't approve mortgages when local economies can't support stable income. The resilience of West Virginians is remarkable, but even the strongest communities eventually break under sustained economic pressure with no relief. West Virginia is trapped in economic decline, but our next state proves that even having a major city can't save you from terrible governance.
Number 8. Illinois. Having Chicago should be an advantage, but Illinois has lost nearly 800,000 residents over the past decade, equivalent to losing a city the size of Seattle. The state has become a cautionary tale about how bad policy drives people away despite natural advantages. Property taxes are America's highest, averaging $9,500 annually in many counties for ordinary homes, not estates.
The state carries over $140 billion in unfunded pension obligations, a financial crisis that will require either massive tax increases or devastating service cuts. Outmigration has increased 30% in the last 5 years, with residents relocating to Indiana, Princeton, Florida, and Texas. Chicago's crime rate runs approximately 3 times the national average, with carjackings and retail theft making regular headlines. Winters are harsh, but residents would tolerate weather if other aspects of life functioned properly. They don't. State government dysfunction is legendary, with corruption scandals, budget crises, and inability to address fundamental problems. The business climate is hostile, with regulations and taxes driving companies to relocate to neighboring states. Illinois possesses incredible assets: world-class universities, cultural institutions, transportation networks, but residents are drowning in taxes while basic services deteriorate. Property tax bills run thousands of dollars, while roads remain full of potholes because money disappears into pension obligations. Government services feel punitive rather than helpful, with bureaucracy that makes simple tasks unnecessarily complicated. The middle class is being squeezed out as the wealthy can afford to stay and the poor lack options, but everyone in between is planning their exit. Brain drain is severe as college graduates leave immediately after school, taking their education and future tax contributions elsewhere. Illinois is losing people to dysfunction and taxes, but our next state is so remote and harsh that even adventure seekers are giving up. But before I show you the next one, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this.
Number 7. Alaska. The last frontier has been losing residents since 2013, with nearly 40,000 people deciding that rugged beauty isn't worth the isolation and expense. Cost of living runs 24% above the national average, with groceries in rural areas costing double what they cost in Seattle because everything must be shipped or flown in. Violent crime rates are shockingly high, among America's worst per capita, with domestic violence and assault rates that contradict the state's sparse population. In northern regions, the sun doesn't rise for over 2 months during winter, and seasonal depression affects huge portions of the population. The state pays residents an annual dividend from oil revenues, but it barely covers heating bills in a place where winter dominates most of the year. Basic services that mainlanders take for granted, medical care, retail shopping, reliable internet, may not exist or require flying to Anchorage. The job market is limited to oil, fishing, tourism, and government work, and when oil prices drop, the entire economy contracts. Healthcare access outside Anchorage is virtually non-existent, with serious medical emergencies requiring expensive evacuations. Heating costs can run $500 to $1,000 monthly during winter, and that's not optional, it's survival. Number 6. Connecticut. Wealth and beauty hide the fact that Connecticut has lost residents every year since 2013, hemorrhaging $12.6 billion in income as people flee to lower-tax states. Cost of living ranks 5th highest nationally, with property taxes averaging over $6,500 annually, and some towns exceeding $10,000 for modest homes. The state charges premium taxes but delivers mediocre services, with crumbling infrastructure and underfunded schools outside wealthy districts. Job growth has flatlined, with wages stagnating for years outside finance and healthcare sectors. Young people leave immediately after college because opportunities don't exist. Despite being sandwiched between New York and Massachusetts, Connecticut is losing more residents than both. Half the people leaving are heading south, not for weather, but to escape taxation that feels punitive. Towns look picture-perfect, with colonial architecture and manicured lawns, but underneath is stagnation and decline. Traffic is terrible, despite the small size, and commuter trains to New York are expensive and unreliable. Connecticut is calcifying into a museum of affluence that only the already wealthy can afford, while everyone else gets priced out or taxed out. The state has everything needed to thrive: location, education, infrastructure, but terrible governance and tax policy drive away the very people who could revitalize it. The state raises taxes to cover budget shortfalls, which drives more people away, creating bigger shortfalls, leading to more tax increases in a death spiral
nobody can stop. Connecticut's losing people to taxes, but our next state is losing them because it's at the bottom of nearly every quality of life metric. Number 5. Mississippi. Mississippi has lost residents every year since 2010, and the reasons are so deeply rooted that solutions seem impossible. Median income sits around $53,000, America's lowest, while poverty rates hover near 19%, almost double the national average. Education ranks 47th nationally, with underfunded schools and low graduation rates. Healthcare access is bottom tier, with the highest infant mortality rate in America, and rural areas having almost no medical facilities. Half the state's counties are officially designated persistently poor by the federal government, a technical classification, not an insult. Young people leave for opportunity. Older residents stay because they have no choice, and everyone in between survives in a state that feels trapped in time. Factories have closed, hospitals have shut down, and the legislature debates culture wars while infrastructure crumbles. Broadband is scarce in rural areas, making remote work impossible and further isolating communities. Jackson, the capital, has one of America's highest homicide rates, while basic services like water treatment fail regularly. Cost of living is low, but that's meaningless without jobs, healthcare, or future prospects. Drive outside Jackson and you're in a different era where infrastructure and services seem forgotten. The contrast with neighboring states is stark. Just across borders, cities in Alabama and Tennessee are growing while Mississippi continues declining. The culture is rich: music, food, storytelling. But culture doesn't pay medical bills or provide employment. People stay out of love for their homeland and hope for improvement, but data suggests that hope is misplaced without massive structural changes. Mississippi's losing people to systemic poverty, but our next state is losing them to something more immediate. It's literally disappearing into the ocean. Number 4. Louisiana. Louisiana is losing a football field of coastline every hour, and about 30,000 residents annually who've decided that resilience has limits. The state ranks third in outmigration, with nearly 200,000 residents leaving since 2016. Violent crime rates are among America's highest, second only to D.C., with New Orleans seeing regular violence that makes national news. The insurance market is collapsing as major companies withdraw after years of billion-dollar hurricane losses, and remaining homeowners pay premiums rivaling their mortgages. Average household income sits around $57,000, while the national average is $75,000, and over half of renters are cost-burdened. Infrastructure is crumbling, with roads, bridges, and levees desperately needing repair but lacking funding. New Orleans has lost over 80,000 residents since Hurricane Katrina, and many who stayed through that disaster are quietly leaving now. The state ranks last in infrastructure quality, with roads full of potholes and bridges rated structurally deficient. Climate change is making hurricanes more frequent and intense, and each storm brings the question of whether to rebuild or give up. Cost of living is low compared to other coastal areas, but that's because risk is so high that property values are depressed. Insurance bills can exceed rent, and residents are one storm away from losing everything. The culture is incredible: jazz, Creole cuisine, festivals. But culture doesn't protect from flooding or pay for hurricane damage. The coastline is literally disappearing, and insurance companies are abandoning the state. Young people leave for stability, taking their education and future contributions to states that aren't sinking. Louisiana's losing people to climate and crime, but our next state is losing them because the boom went bust and isolation remains. Number 3. North Dakota. The oil boom brought thousands of workers, but now North Dakota's population is shrinking as the boom ended and harsh reality remains. Net outmigration exceeded 5,000 residents in 2023, with oil and gas employment down 8.4% over 5 years. Weather brings over 50 days of sub-zero temperatures annually. Actual sub-zero, not just cold, with wind chills that can be deadly. Population density is less than 11 people per square mile, creating isolation that's crushing for anyone used to human interaction. The job market is limited to oil, agriculture, and government work, and when oil prices drop, the economy contracts. Winter darkness arrives by mid-afternoon, and social interaction becomes scarce. Economic fallout hit hardest in rural towns that bet everything on oil, and when prices dropped, jobs and people disappeared. Healthcare access outside Fargo and Bismarck is virtually non-existent, with serious emergencies requiring long drives or helicopter evacuations. The isolation isn't romantic, it's crushing, especially for families with children. At one point, Williston had more jobs than housing, with people sleeping in trucks while making six figures. Today, you can rent a 3-bedroom for $800 and still not want to live there. The contrast is telling. Florida has chaos, crime, and humidity, yet attracts more people daily than North Dakota gets in a year. North Dakota's losing people to isolation, but our next state is losing them despite having everything, because the taxes and dysfunction are unbearable.
Number 2, New Jersey. More people left New Jersey last year than any other state, with over 65,000 residents departing in 2023 alone, nearly 2,000 per week. Property taxes are America's highest, averaging $9,500 annually for modest homes, with some towns exceeding $15,000. Cost of living runs 14% above the national average, and median rent for a 1-bedroom in Hoboken hits $2,980 monthly. Residents face taxation at every level: property, income, sales, while sitting in traffic and dodging potholes. The job market requires commuting 90 minutes to Manhattan, paying bridge tolls, and spending life on expensive, unreliable trains. The state is close to everything: New York, Philadelphia, beaches, mountains, but residents pay premium prices for that proximity while receiving mediocre services. New Jersey has everything needed to thrive, but terrible governance and punitive taxation are driving away the middle class. The wealthy can afford to stay, the poor have no choice, but everyone in between is calculating their escape. Meanwhile, states like Tennessee offer lower costs, no state income tax, and better quality of life, making the choice obvious for those who can leave. New Jersey's losing people to taxes and dysfunction, but our final state combines nearly every problem into one catastrophic situation. Number 1, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has lost over 500,000 residents since 2010, more than 14% of its entire population, and the exodus continues accelerating. This isn't one problem, but a perfect storm of economic collapse, infrastructure failure, climate vulnerability, and political neglect. Unemployment hovers around 6%, double the U.S. average, while poverty rates hit 41.7%. Nearly half the population. Median household income is $21,967, lower than every U.S. state, and over half of renters are cost-burdened. The power grid is catastrophic, with major blackouts lasting days and residents learning to live without reliable electricity. Infrastructure ranks last, with roads full of potholes, bridges failing, and basic services simply not functioning. Hurricane Maria in 2017 killed thousands and destroyed infrastructure that still hasn't been rebuilt, and each subsequent storm raises the question of whether to stay or leave. The insurance market is collapsing as companies refuse coverage, and those who can get insurance pay crushing premiums. Basic services fail regularly, and the streets flood with minimal rain. Puerto Rico feels abandoned by the country it's legally part of, American enough to pay federal taxes and serve in the military, but not quite American enough for equal disaster aid or infrastructure investment. The culture is beautiful: music, food, beaches. But culture doesn't keep lights on or protect from hurricanes. People leaving aren't abandoning their homeland lightly. They're making impossible choices between love of place and basic quality of life. The brain drain is devastating as educated young people leave for the mainland, taking skills and future contributions to places offering stability and functioning infrastructure. So there you have it, but make sure you subscribe if you want more videos like this.